You know, to your point, I never wanted to become the sideshow, and I avoided it at all costs because it's not what my forte is. It's not what my expertise is.
I said, Rodney, you know, you've used a bunch of jokes that you never paid me for. He said, all right, look, you know, you owe me $1,000, right? Let's figure I used 10 jokes. So you still owe me 10 jokes, $50. You still owe me 10 jokes. So I said, that's fine by me.
And all she ever wanted was to watch Seinfeld to help cheer her up. And this is, you know, pre-DVD days when you couldn't just buy DVDs or download or stream. And Ralph owned like a VHS compilation that was like taped off of the air of every Seinfeld episode. And, you know, he asked me to make a copy of it, and they were going to send it to the teacher in the hospital to cheer her up. And lo and behold, she goes to put this tape in, and it's a porn tape.
So when do you realize, as you're doing this job, that I'm going to be part of this show? He's going to yell at me. He's going to come at me. He's going to come at the pace. I remember you mentioned Gump. I remember Gump being on one of the E shows. That's what's so funny is I just remember back. So when did you realize? He's going after Baba Booey. Now he's going after Jackie. What did I do? Now Ganji's getting it. I'm coming next. When did you realize that being part of the TV crew was going to be, I'm going to be part of the show now?
Yeah, you know, I was, I guess, a little naive at the very beginning because it's like, I'm behind the scenes guy. He's not going to care about me. But I don't know how long it was. It was probably a few weeks before I made it onto the air. And I was like, oh, boy, game on. But yeah, I mean, I was not expecting to be on, but you know, as you become more associated with the show and friendly with everyone on the show and just a part of the family or the team there, just everything, you couldn't do anything. I mean, you could walk in the hall and just, you know, scratch your nose. And next thing you know, you're on the air because Doug was picking his nose in the hallway, and then you defend it. And then it just escalates. The more you defend yourself or the more you sort of fight back, it just became, you know, you just exacerbate the inevitable, which is it just always evolved into something that is something as innocent as just, you know, scratching your cheek could become fodder.
Is that right away? Like, hey, be ready. You're going to be, you're not only the news guy, you're going to be a character like Robin and Artie and Fred. Steve's going to be over here. We're going to do stuff with Steve.
Well, you know, going in, that anything they know about is going to happen on the air. It's not scripted. To my knowledge, it was never, I mean, nobody ever handed me a script. But I also, my attitude going in was, we're the news team. We just cover it. You know, we're not stars. We're not in the same league as all these people on the Stern show. We simply come in and cover the news, and that's it. Now, that said, because of the audience, you become somewhat well known. I remember one day, somebody said, listen, can you call Leslie West from the rock group Mountain and just see if we can find him on here's a phone number and see if we can get a quick interview with him. And, you know, I'm of that. I remember Woodstock and Leslie West from Mountain. Like, holy crap. So I call this number and I go, Mr. West? Yes. I go, my name is Steve Lange, whenever we're reporting. Steve, how are you? And I said,
how soon do you become fodder for Howard? And did you realize that was going to be part of this gig, that you would be coming in and having to tell him, Howard, no, you can't do that? And did you enjoy that? And why was it you? Why couldn't it have been like the program manager? Why did you have to become the guy that had to say no to everything? Usually, I always think of the general manager knowing the business a little bit. It's just the guy who makes sure that the money's coming in. But you became the dad of the show.
Yeah, I did. I was the hall monitor. I was both. You know, I mean, it became that. It became me because when there's that word again. Now I'm going to think about that every time I say it.
Absolutely.
It was me because it was my responsibility. General managers are responsible for the licenses of their radio stations, and then I had a conversation with my boss Mel. You know, when we got the first FCC complaint. You know, which we were not guilty, and we were never guilty, and said, you know, what's the most important job? Well, the most important job is protecting the license, right? So that's when I started having to come in the morning and edit the show.
What was that like when you did start? Because I remember I listened a lot, and they mentioned your name, but it seemed like you became more on air. Was that fun for you to go in and be part of the show?
No, it was something that I avoided at all costs. And Howard would always tell me, "Hey, you're not a team player. You're not a team player." And I said, "Look, I'm running your company. I'm running your business. And it makes it very difficult when you turn me into a sideshow because I got to negotiate contracts. I've got to develop relationships with people. I've got to, run the day to day. And just by this conversation alone, to your point, I never wanted to become the sideshow. And I avoided it at all costs because it's not what my forte is. It's not what my expertise is. I'm good at relationships. I'm good at, driving the day to day, in an organization like that. And I know what has to be done. I have a vision of it, but I just didn't. That was a distraction to me, and it was. It took away from time that could have been more productive. So I thought it was more a detriment than it was a help.
How did you enjoy the news team being around there, always fishing around?
Well, we created it. So we created that monster, and it was content. We were just a content, machine, 24/7, 365, and it was all part of the game.
But then they start reporting on people like you. Like, don't you go, "I created this monster. What the hell was I thinking?"
Yeah, it was what it was, but you learn through experience and all that. But it was just a good group of people.
So what I kind of did was my wife and I would go out and do stuff, and we kind of put together the notes on Sunday. We'd sit up on the roof of our apartment building and kind of smoke, and then put together the notes on Sunday, and I would email them to Jason and say, and he would always, I'd always tell him, like, "Hey, if you want this story, I'm glad to come in and tell it. If not, no big deal." So and they would, it would go into the stack that they present Howard, and he would call you in if it was an interesting story. It was basically that. I loved, as acrimonious as it was, I loved the back and forth with Shuli and I, and people think I hate Shuli. I really don't. He's like a brother. Shuli and I worked together fucking 24/7, it seemed like. From the moment we got to the building to the moment we left, Shuli and I worked together a lot. So we were kind of like brothers. We would fight like that on the air. So I love Shuli. I don't dislike him, but I did like what he did for this reason. It's because a lot of people out there have misperceptions like Shuli does. And he was representing a portion of the audience that just has this complete misperception of what swinging is or what the lifestyle is. Most people, if you're not in it, you really don't know or have any idea what's going on. And a lot of people have those misperceptions. And I was glad Shuli and Howard kind of filled that void for the audience so they could take that position.
What's it like for you when now you've had a few pretty good arguments with Shuli and Ralph on the air, and then you have to go back and watch it and know that, all right, that's going to have to make it, and that's going to live in perpetuity, and I see it on YouTube now. Does that stuff kind of come to your head when you're like, oh shit, what did I just do?
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to like it was a very real environment. So when you're on the air or it is a show, a lot of people. What made that show so interesting and unique is that it was people were real raw, and it was real emotions, and it was real fights, and it was real arguments, and it was just. You almost forgot sometimes, a lot of people would come off the air and be like, oh my God, like, what the hell just happened here? You feel like you're having an argument with someone face to face and you're not realizing it's on the air. So you're like, oh shoot, yeah, sure. There's certainly moments where you're like, oh man, what the hell?
Well, that's part of it though, right? Because Howard breaks it down and makes you feel like you're just in a room with guys and it's like, right? I mean, it feels like that's what happens with that show.
Absolutely, yeah. And even with the guests, that's always been the thing. It's just you sit down on that couch, and it's just like you just feel like you're having a conversation, not an interview, not live, not on the air for people to be listening to. Just very comfort. That was the best skill he has, is just making people feel comfortable and almost forgetting where they are, that they're actually not just having a conversation without microphones and being broadcast.
You do have this call from Sour Shoes that comes in that's not actually Sour Shoes. Can you laugh about that now looking back? Because I mean, this thing was played over and over.
Yeah, I know. I often tell Gary that, I did 6 years of a lot of really great reporting, and the only damn thing they play is that alleged prank phone call.
What was it like? I mean, to know that they got you, and not only did they get you, it's, some people do a practical joke and then it's over, but this thing is going to be played now I mean, you just hear Howard's shoes.
Well, listen, worse things have happened on that show, but I got to tell you, I like pranks, and I mean good pranks. I often said that, calling me 300 times while I'm trying to get my work done is not necessarily a prank. In fact, I asked Howard at the time, I said, okay, this is really funny. Give me your phone number, Howard, and I'll call you 300 times over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a great laugh about it. But like a real prank, it seemed to me, was the time when Artie and Ronnie pranked me amazingly. And that is, I'm standing the cue each day when I had to come in and do the headlines on the Stern Show, was I would stand outside the studio and simply listen to the show. And all of a sudden, Howard out of the blue would go, Steve Langford's coming in now with the headlines. I'd have to race in. So one day I'm standing there at the door with my script and I'm listening to the show. And Ronnie goes from across the hall in Scott's studio, goes, come here. And I go, no, I think Howard's going to call me right. Oh, come on, just come for a second. So he wants to show me something 10 feet across in Scott's studio. Little do I know, Scott hits a button, a tape that says Steve Langford's now coming in with a Howard 100. So I go, whoa! I go racing into the studio, and I put the headphones on and go, and Howard's in the middle of something, and he goes, Steve, what's up? I mean, you're welcome to be, but what's the occasion? What? And he could tell from my face, and he goes, what's the matter? And I go, I've been had. And he goes, who did this? I want names. At which point I thought it was the funniest thing on earth. And so he hauls Ronnie in. He's got Artie in there already, and he starts screaming at them for 10 minutes. Obscenities. He went nuts. And at first I was laughing, and then finally he was so mad I stopped laughing. But I thought that was a great prank.
And I do remember you spent a lot of time in that hallway, right? Like that was kind of the worst part. You don't even know, right? When you're coming in, and then
you'd wait for 45 minutes to like this. Oh, wait a minute, he calls. I got to go in and I got to deliver this news, and there's no place to put your paper. You got to put the headphones on and hold on to your papers. But it was a great opportunity.
So I mentioned this tape. I think that's the big first thing that happened to you, right? Like, tell me a little bit about. So what, you were supposed to tape something?
I mean, there were many, many big things that happened before that. I mean, that wasn't necessarily the biggest thing. But it was memorable, maybe? Is this probably one of the most memorable because he also put it in the book. He retold that story in the book.
And would you
so I think that really, at the end of the day, kind of cemented that story. In case
people don't know what we're talking about.
So the story was, yeah. Which version do you want? Do you want the version that he told on the air? Do you want the version that he told on the air, or do you want the truth? Because they're not the same.
Go both.
But I'll tell you his story. So his story was, he had his daughter's teacher was dying in the hospital, and all she ever wanted was to watch Seinfeld to help cheer her up. And this is, pre-DVD days when you couldn't just buy DVDs or download or stream. And Ralph owned like a VHS compilation that was like taped off of the air of every Seinfeld episode. And, he asked me to make a copy of it, and they were going to send it to the teacher in the hospital to cheer her up. And lo and behold, she goes to put this tape in, and it's a porn tape. It's, it's a enema tape or whatever. I forget, a Japanese enema tape or whatever he referred to it as. And, obviously he was very embarrassed, and it was a whole big thing, and he had usually apologized and blah, 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 blah. So that's the legendary story of the Seinfeld tape.
Oh, that's just to hear you set it up and tell it. It's really, to hear it from the person that, how did that happen? So you're blaming Ralph? Are we blaming Ralph?
No, here's exactly what the story, here's how it happened, in a play-by-play. I was handed both tapes the end of the day, and you got to remember this was like a 6-hour VHS dub, so it was one of those things that I would set up to record before I left for the night, and the next morning you'd come in and you'd deal with it then, because to sit around. I wasn't going to run a dub for 6 hours because I wasn't there that long. So I set up a dub. I was handed both tapes. I was handed the Seinfeld tape and the supposed blank tape. Now, the supposed blank tape is dub stock. So why, if this was so important, would somebody give me dub stock of a porn, right? You'd make it a brand new tape so you wouldn't have any issues. So my bad was that I forgot, and you're a little bit older, so maybe you'd remember this. You used to have to put, because the tab was pulled. So you used to have to put a piece of tape over that tab so it would record. So my bad was I don't think I ever either put the tape on it or I never really hit the record button properly that the record started. But I think it was more the tape because I remember seeing the tape playing and assuming that it was dubbing. So the next morning, I get a call from Howard's assistant asking if the dub is done. And I was at the show at that time. I didn't get back to his office until mid-afternoon. And I was like, I assume so. I set it to record. And she's like, okay, great. So she popped it out and then mailed it out. So there was no opportunity for me to check the work because I wasn't there to see that it didn't record. So really, I had a portion of that, but it wasn't all on me. So that's the story. It's not as funny when you're listening to it that way than when it's all my fault and I screwed up.
There is a reason why he's the king of all media. He did tell that story much better than
yeah, exactly. Like when you look at the truth isn't as funny as the version that's super embellished.
It's still great. It's still a great story.
He finds humor in everything, and he finds that it's his ability to take people and to make them in some ways more than they are, or to take advantage of whatever they are, for their comedic content. So whether I was the in quotes boss. I was in the books, with a picture of me in his books and stuff like that. And he liked to call my wife sometimes and joke about, your husband's so handsome, try and put my wife in awkward positions, because that's what made him funny, and who doesn't like the guy who pokes, at his boss? And I was just happened to be that guy in that spot. And, I was enough there's enough of me or enough of ham in me, that I was fine with it. And I got it early on. I remember very, very early on at one of our Infinity Broadcasting managers meetings presenting just that. I said, if you don't get the joke, you're not going to be successful. And I got the joke from the very beginning. I'm proud of that. I figured it out. I figured out how to go along with the joke. There were times that he and I fought, but for the most part, we got along. And I always respected him. I think he always respected me. So I'm proud of the 20-year relationship that we had that I think was built on mutual respect. It certainly was on my part. I can't answer for him, but I think he'd say that. And we figured it out. And I was fine with it. I hated it at times. I hated having to be the guy, to tell him you can't do this or you can't do that and argue over words. Because when I became the censor, I didn't want to be a censor, but it was my job, and I accepted the job. I got paid to do it, and therefore accepted that responsibility.
You mentioned something here and I was listening, and it made me think of the fact that, when you'd come in, it clearly he was angry, but everyone always says, oh, he's different off the air. But it does become a great bit for the radio that, oh, here comes Tom. There was theme songs. Here comes Tom. Tom, it's time to stop having fun. And all these songs. So it became a bit, and he created a character for you. And so maybe that's what it was. I mean, as bad as we all think it was for you and him having to deal with you, the fact that it was a bit just made it good radio, and that's all that really mattered to him.
Yeah, and that's all that really mattered to me. End of the day, that's all that really mattered to me. And I knew if we were arguing, it probably wasn't about. It may have been about things that had related to a body part or a body function or whatever. But it wasn't dealing directly with it. And and those were the those were the things where the people who, when they started to super focus on him, and the religious right, was going out of their way to try and drive him off the air. Those are the things that they were focused on. And if we were arguing about whether 50 Cent, or I should say properly, whether 50 Cent could say bitch 100 times, in 5 minutes, or whatever the other things would be, that at least it wasn't about those things that that we were being super focused on by people on the religious right.
What did you think of that at the point of where you're now running the dump button? I mean, you're the executive of the show, and you should be dealing with other stuff, but you really just sat there and had to listen, right? I mean, did you ever think?
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I sat there for 6+ years listening to every word, and editing it when unfortunately when I thought I needed to.
How hard was that? How hard was it to know that this is going to create some drama later, that he knows it?
I didn't even think about it. I just did what I had to do.
Okay.
Honestly, it was regrettable. I didn't want it, but I knew I had to do it. And the idea was I was going to do it for a very brief period of time until we found a person better suited to do it. But we only did after I got sick. When I got sick in '98, obviously I wasn't coming in, and I was out of work for 14 weeks. My life was on the line, so editing the show was no longer a priority. I was in a hospital.
It was a year. The year was up, and I now go sit and Tom renegotiate. I was like, look, Tom, I just working 60 hours. Really, why don't you just pay me for 40 so I can get health insurance? That would be kind of cool. And can I get a little more? He's like, no. I was like, I'm not asking you to pay me for the 60. Just give me 40 so I can actually go to a doctor. He goes, no. You'll work 30. I'll give you the company standard increase, which is 25% on $6.40. What does that come out to? I don't know, but it's not a lot. And he goes, that's that. And then from now on, you have to leave when you can't work after your 30 hours. I'm like, So I again had that conversation with Howard, bringing him down. I told him what I just told you, and this is the moment I decided to leave. Howard goes, that's Tom. And I went, yo, I'm done. So if I stay here and have to eat that bowl of shit every day, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to burn this bridge. I'll never be allowed back. So I said, you know what? I'm going to LA to be an actor, and I'm leaving the show. I might as well bow out like a gentleman and not go out like a punk, because it would have been bad. I was angry enough. I didn't need any more. That would have put me over the edge, so I just bowed out.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite moments is when you get your head shaved, and that's right when you started, I think, right? And you were so quiet. And
I was there for a while, but you got to understand something.
You didn't, but this personality that I've seen you come up with, like during the serious days and now in your podcast, which we'll talk about in a second. But the young gorilla was like, don't touch my hair.
Well, here's the deal. You have a wonderful head of hair. Look at that.
Look at it. I know. I haven't cut it since March.
So my biggest phobia ever since I was a kid was to lose my hair. I love women. I think that if you don't have nice hair, women aren't going to like you. My whole life. So as a kid, I used to walk around with a brush in my back pocket. I had to have conditioner. I had a blow dryer. I had mousse. I had hairspray. The biggest fear, because I was terrified of losing my hair, like phobic. So when I started losing my hair, I just happened to be working on a radio show where 20 million people listen. And I got made fun of on a daily basis. So my anxiety was already ready to explode. And then I had that happen. And then the salespeople came in and they were like, we got this new sponsor. It's a hair transplant thing. They want you to fucking be, they're going to do everything for free. You'll have a full head of hair. How will make fun of you anymore? And like that was my anxiety-ridden state in answer. So I went to this butcher and had it done. And I was 22. No one 22 should ever go to fucking a hair transplant. But they let it happen. I did it. He still made fun of me. And I knew they're gone now. I had them taken out. I still do have the scars, which I don't care. I'm still...
Which Jackie was drawing as was a map. As it was go to the Catskills, make a left, and you'll be in Long Island.
Yeah. So that day, I pretty much didn't go to sleep. I was at Scores the night before. I was still half in a bag, in a foul mood. And then they came up with the hair in the can spray thing. And I didn't want to do it. And they made me do it. And then it was like me, Scott the Pace, Scott the engineer. They did it. And I was just like, I was foul.
They raised like 10 grand and then there was a viewing party and it wasn't working.
You understand at some point that I blacked out and there was someone else driving the car? Like, I watched some of that and I go, I don't remember that at all. Because I went into a state of catastrophic, like a coma.
Yeah, well, I mean that's when the show. It's when the show started too. So it was like one of the first 2-part episodes, and and you started almost crying. It was such good.
I remember after I watched that, I went down to get Howard's lunch, and for Stuttering John to come down and say, "I'm getting it," because he did not want that dude touching his food. He goes, "You have to go up there right now." And I was like, "Oh no!" And by that time, it was like at that time, it was already up to like $600, and I was like, "Nope." And the more I resisted, the more money came in. And then I was broke. So by the time it got to like $4,000, I was just like, click, and they just did whatever they did. And but I remember being at Scores that night because they put it right away, and it was the show was on all over the Scores. And that night, Jake LaMotta was there, and I'll never forget. It was like, in the house tonight, we have Jake LaMotta, but Steve Grillo is here, and I was like, I just got like Jake LaMotta, the Raging Bull. They didn't care that Jake LaMotta's here. It was crazy.
When Rodney Dangerfield comes in and he does an interview, this is when he still has his wits about him. I think it was like 97. He walks out, and then Howard goes, "Oh wait, did you, Jackie? Did you and Rodney have a beef?" And you paid him. Tell me that story. And what did it feel like when Howard called him back in?
I'm going to tell you the entire story. The true story is in my book called Joke Man. The Joke Man Bow to Stern. I've explained this a million times. People still think I'm lying or crazy, and it's just it's so absurd. But the bottom line was that I sent Rodney a joke that he loved, and he bought 4 jokes for $50 a joke, $200. I went to see him at Westbury Music Fair. I still had a ponytail. I was a couple of years from becoming a comedian, and he loved my Tennessee 2-bagger joke, and I sent him jokes from then on. I kept sending him jokes, and he only once in a while. He was very picky. Every comic in New York sold him a joke here and there, but very rarely, but it was $50 a joke. It couldn't have been more known in the comedy circuit. And at some point, I wrote to him and said, "Roddy, I want to reprint my album, and I have no money. Can I borrow $1,000?" And he loved me, and he got so much mileage out of the 2-bagger. I was his pal, so he said, "Yeah, no problem." And he said, "Come by," and I went and picked up a check for $1,000, which he lent me. And then over the next however many months or years, he never bought other jokes. And all of a sudden, I saw a joke that he said on Carson, or I heard a joke on an album that I had sent him that he hadn't bought, which I don't care. But, and this is what I didn't say when on the Stern Show. I wanted to say, Rodney, you were so drunk and so coked up and always stoned. You didn't know what was going on. He didn't have a bookkeeping section and a secretary. He's just some crazy man. And so I went to see him at Dangerfield's, and I met him in a dressing room. I said, "Rodney, you've used a bunch of jokes that you never paid me for." He said, "All right, look, you owe me $1,000, right? Let's figure I used 10 jokes. So you still owe me 10 jokes, $50 a joke. You still owe me 10 jokes." So I said, "That's fine by me." And I just wanted to have him acknowledge that I had sent him the jokes. But the idea of, you already paid me half of it in jokes and you owe me 10 more jokes, that was his concept, not my concept, but it makes perfect sense because it's simple barter. If you buy something that costs 25 cents and if you buy 3 of them, it's 75 cents. It was not rocket science. So he didn't buy anything. He didn't buy. We had wound up going to Las Vegas and Fort Lauderdale and had the greatest time in the world. And we flew first class, and he paid for everything. He paid for my hotel room and booze and, you know, and Coke and, you know, God knows what that all cost. And then I'm doing terrible. I'm doing terrible. And I had a new album I had finished, and I had no money. And I wrote to him and said, Rodney, I got another album I want to put out, and I have no money. Can I borrow $2,000? And he never wrote back, which is his prerogative. Like, who cares? You know, if I ask you to borrow $5 and you say no, that's your prerogative. Who cares? After he came on, he was leaving, and I don't know exactly what Ganji said to him, but Ganji said something about, hey, Rodney, you see Jackie in there? And Rodney's a show business guy. Now, I don't know if he was smart enough, but not smart enough, but whether he was, I'm not sure why, whether he thought that they would pick up on this. He said, yeah, you know, he still owes me some money, you know, and which I didn't. You know, I kind of did, but God knows what jokes I had sent over the years, whatever. The operative thing being $500 to him was a ridiculous amount of money compared to the amount of money he spent on me, right? So Kansas starts talking to him, and Rodney comes back in. And Rodney says, yeah, and then he has to borrow another $2,000 because Rodney knows he's getting all kinds of airtime. He's got a show that night at the Beacon. And by the time, and there was a writer there from TV Guide, and I said, look, I'll give you $1,000, you know, because everybody's very hard. The worst thing Rodney said, and he was totally lying. He said, I don't know anything about this paying in jokes, which was all he had to say. You know, and every comic in the world knows that, you know, there's, I can name 100 guys that have sold him jokes for $50 a joke. So I wrote out a check to him for $1,000 and walked over and handed it to him. And whoever the writer was from TV Guide, he took the check. I'm sure he still has it on his you know, bulletin board somewhere. But then he said, yeah, and then he asked for $2,000 more, you know, real ballsy, you know. And I had seen him in Fort Lauderdale, and I had, in the afternoon one time at the comic shop, and I said, are you mad at me? He said, no, you know, I thought it was a little ballsy asking for another couple grand, but, you know, I didn't want to give it to you. I said, well, that's fine. He said, yeah, too bad. You know, it was the best fucking joke I ever had, blah, blah, blah. He goes back in and starts talking, and he tells Howard how I had asked him for another $2,000. By the time Rodney left the show that day, Howard had me owing him $3,000, which, number one, isn't a lot of money to Rodney Dangerfield or to anybody, really. But, of course, I didn't owe him $3,000, and yet even answered my request for the $2,000. But anything like that was never going to find its way onto the air with Howard. And I wasn't going to go, Rodney. You know, you were so coked up. You know, you never gave me that money, and he didn't. He never said he did. Just that's how Howard would. If you went back and listened to it, I'm sure. You know, I didn't go back and listen to it because I'd just get crazy. But to this day, if I go out, somebody will say, Jackie, you want me to buy you a beer? I know you ain't buying one, you cheap bastard. Rodney's dead for 5 or 10 years. People send me emails. Pay back Rodney, you cheap fuck. You know, like, which is funny. It's it was great theater. But that's the absolute truth of the whole matter. And a lot of people say, God, it was so interesting to read it in the book because it makes total sense when you read it. But that you know, I don't fault that because that's Howard's genius. You know, he had the whole world thinking I was cheap and that I was angry and that I was no fun and I had no friends. And like my friends were like flabbergasted because I couldn't be more generous.